Chapter 29, page 367. Zia sets a rendezvous. Yeah, thanks a lot, Sadie. You get to tell the part about the land of the dead. I get to describe Interstate 10 through Texas. Long story short, it took forever and was totally boring, unless your idea of fun is watching cows graze. We left New Orleans about 1 a.m. on December 28th, the day before Set planned to destroy the world. Bast had borrowed an RV, a FEMA leftover from Hurricane Katrina. At first, Bast suggested taking a plane, but after I told her about my dream of the magicians on the exploding flight, we agreed planes might not be a good idea. The sky goddess Nut had promised us safe air travel as far as Memphis, but I didn't want to press our luck the closer we get to Set. Set is not our problem, Bast said. If your vision is correct, the magicians are closing in on us, and not just any magicians. Desjardins himself. And Zia, Sadie put in, just to annoy me. In the end, we decided it was safer to drive, even though it was slower. With luck, we'd made Phoenix just in time to challenge Set. As for the House of Life, all we could do was hope to avoid them while we did our job. Maybe, once we dealt with Set, the magicians would decide we were cool. Maybe. I kept thinking about Desjardins, wondering if he really could be a host for Set. A day ago, it had made perfect sense. Desjardins wanted to crush the Kane family. He'd hated our dad, and he hated us. He'd probably been waiting for decades, even centuries, for Iskandar to die, so he could become Chief Lector. Power, anger, arrogance, ambition. Desjardins had it all. If Set was looking for a soulmate, literally, he couldn't do much better. And if Set could start a war between the gods and magicians by controlling the Chief Lector, the only winner would be the forces of chaos. Besides, Desjardins was an easy guy to hate. Somebody had sabotaged Amos's house and alerted Set that Amos was coming. But the way Desjardins saved all those people on the plane, that just didn't seem like something the Lord of Evil would do. Bast and Khufu took turns driving, while Sadie and I dozed off and on. I didn't know how baboons could drive recreational vehicles, but Khufu did okay. When I woke up around dawn, he was navigating through early morning rush hour in Houston, baring his fangs and barking a lot, and none of the other drivers seemed to notice anything out of the ordinary. For breakfast, Sadie, Bast, and I sat in the RV's kitchen, while the cabinets banged open and the dishes clinked and miles of nothing went by outside. Bast had snagged us some snacks and drinks, and Friskies, of course, from a New Orleans all-night convenience store before we left. But nobody seemed very hungry. I could tell Bast was anxious. She'd already shredded most of the RV's upholstery and was now using the kitchen table as a scratching post. As for Sadie, she kept opening and closing her hand, staring at the feather of truth as if it were a phone she wished would ring. Ever since her disappearance in the Hall of Judgment, she'd been acting all distant and quiet. Not that I'm complaining, but it wasn't like her. What happened with Anubis? I asked her for the millionth time. She glared at me, ready to bite my head off. Then she apparently decided I wasn't worth the effort. She fixed her eyes on the glowing feather that hovered over her palm. We talked, she said carefully. He asked me some questions. What kind of questions? Carter, don't ask. Please. Please? Okay, that really wasn't like Sadie. I looked at Bast, but she wasn't any help. She was slowly gouging the formica to bits with her claws. What's wrong? I asked her. She kept her eyes on the table. In the land of the dead, I abandoned you. Again. Anubis startled you, I said. It's no big deal. Bast gave me the big yellow eyes, and I got the feeling I'd only made things worse. I made a promise to your father, Carter. In exchange for my freedom, he gave me a job even more important than fighting the serpent, protecting Sadie, and if it ever became necessary, protecting both of you. Sadie flushed. Bass, thank you and all, but we're hardly more important than fighting. You know him? You don't understand, Bass said. The two of you are not just blood of the pharaohs. You're the most powerful royal children to be born in centuries. You're the only chance we have at reconciling the gods and the house of life, of relearning the old ways before it's too late. If you could learn the path of the gods, you could find others with royal blood and teach them. You could revitalize the house of life. What your parents did, everything they did, was to prepare the way for you. Sadie and I were silent. What do you say to something like that? I guess I'd always felt like my parents loved me, but willing to die for me? Believing it was necessary so Sadie and I could do something amazing, world-saving stuff? I didn't ask for that. They didn't want to leave you alone, Bass said, reading my expression. They didn't plan on it, but they knew releasing the gods would be dangerous. Believe me, they understood how special you are. At first I was protecting you two because I promised. Now, even if I hadn't promised, I would. You two are like kittens to me. I won't fail you again. I'll admit I got a lump in my throat. I'd never been called someone's kitten before. Sadie sniffled. She brushed something from under her eye. You're not going to wash us, are you? It was good to see Bass smile again. I'll try to resist. And by the way, Sadie, I'm proud of you. Dealing with Anubis on your own, those death gods can be nasty customers. Sadie shrugged. She seemed strangely uncomfortable. Well, I wouldn't call him nasty. He looked hardly more than a teenager. What are you talking about? I said. He had the head of a jackal. No, when he turned human. Sadie? I was starting to get worried about her now. When Anubis turned human, he still had the head of a jackal. He was huge and terrifying and, yeah, pretty nasty. Why, what did he look like to you? Her cheeks reddened. He looked like a mortal guy. Probably a glamour, Bass said. No, Sadie insisted. It couldn't have been. Well, it's not important, I said. We got the feather. Sadie fidgeted, as if it was very important. But then she closed her fist and the feather of truth disappeared. It won't do us any good without the secret name of Set. I'm working on that. Bass' gaze shifted around the room. She seemed afraid of being overheard. I've got a plan, but it's dangerous. I sat forward. What is it? We'll have to make a stop. I'd rather not jinx us until we get closer, but it's on our way. Shouldn't cause much of a delay. I tried to calculate. This is the morning of the second demon day? Bass nodded. The day Horus was born. And Set's birthday is tomorrow, the third demon day. That means we have about 24 hours until he destroys North America. And if he gets his hands on us, Sadie added, he'll ramp up his power even more. It'll be enough time, Bass said. It's roughly 24 hours driving from New Orleans to Phoenix, and we've already been on the road for over 5 hours. If we don't have any more nasty surprises. Like the kind we have every day? Yes, Bass admitted, like those. I took a shaky breath. 24 hours and it would be over, one way or the other. We'd save Dad and stop Set, or everything would have been for nothing. Not just what Sadie and I had done, but all our parents' sacrifices too. Suddenly I felt like I was underground again, in one of those tunnels in the first Nome, with 1,000,000 tons of rock over my head. One little shift in the ground and everything would come crashing down. Well, I said, if you need me, I'll be outside playing with sharp objects. I grabbed my sword and headed for the back of the RV.